Hi guys, so I haven't done a lot of album reviews this year, and I decided it was a good time to kind of go over some of the ones that I've missed out on, some of the ones that I haven't talked about, before we get into some of the bigger ones that are coming up that I want to talk about. And remember, I haven't listened to every single album that's come out this year, hence why there's a lot of albums that I didn't actually review, but these are just some of the biggest ones that I have actually listened to, and ones that I have opinions on at least. So let's get straight into it. 'Cause you're the last of a dying breed. Our names in the wet concrete. I wonder if the therapist knows. I don't know what happened here. I didn't like any of the singles from Mania, to be fair, except for the last of the real ones, which is probably one of the only songs in the album I actually somewhat like. It's not a good song by any means, but it's definitely not Young and Menace or any of those songs. I don't really like post Save Rock and Roll Fall Out Boy. I think that album's the last one they've done that's actually had anything of substance on it. American Beauty, American Psycho was just not good, and Mania is somehow even worse than that. They've just, every ounce of creativity that they had is just completely gone. I mean, it mostly gone on the last album, but at this point, there's just nothing. There's no passion put into this album. It doesn't sound like any of the band members actually want to be there. And I say band members, it's not really a band, it's mostly just Patrick Stump at this point. There's like almost no guitars throughout the entire album. The drums are all electronic. I don't know about bass, there's probably some bass in there, but for the most part that just all sounded electronic as well. It's just a lifeless, unenergetic pop album with nothing of substance at all. They clearly did not care about this album at all. I'm curious as to how the original version of the album, the one that they ended up scrapping to spend more time on it, would have been, because if there was a version of this album out that wasn't good enough to be released, and this was the version that got released, that original version must have been absolutely awful. I mean, this is absolutely awful, so I literally cannot imagine how that older version, which apparently wasn't good enough, is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm planning on doing a video about this album probably in depth. I'm thinking of doing just a video about post hiatus Fall Out Boy and how they went from being a good band to a band that released Mania. So yeah, that will hopefully be out sometime soon. But yeah, Mania is absolute trash. I give Mania a 1 out of 10, I guess. Like, that's me being generous. So I had no hype for Mania, but the new Cane Hill album was actually one I was really looking forward to, because I loved their debut, Smile. I thought that was just an incredible new metalcore album. It was just really aggressive, unrelenting, but yet it was full of these almost catchy songs at times. I thought that was one of the best metal albums of 2016. I just really dig it, and it's one that I've been coming back to ever since its release. But Too Far Gone, it isn't really that good at all. It's just, imagine sort of like the slower songs from Korn, like sort of just that really dirty, low-pitched vocal lines, just them trying to be all edgy and creepy. Imagine that, but not working as well as it did on those Korn albums. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. This album is just really boring. I didn't find any song really stuck out. Lyrically, it was a really bad album. It seemed like they were kind of on autopilot for the whole thing. It lacked all the aggression of their first album, and that wouldn't have been a huge problem with the new songs, the new slower direction they were going in, if the songwriting and everything kind of backed up that style and made it interesting, but it didn't. Like, the songs on this album just are so uninteresting and forgettable. I didn't like this album. I was so disappointed by it. Hopefully Cane Hill pick things up on their next album, but I guess we'll see. And speaking of new metal, metalcore albums, the new OM&M album was one that really surprised me. I will admit I've never been a big OM&M fan. I like a few of their earliest songs, and the Resting Force album I actually kind of enjoyed. But yeah, I really didn't like their last album. I can't even remember what it's called, that's how much I disliked it. And their earlier stuff, although there was songs, especially on their debut self-titled album, which I really liked, for the most part there was nothing really that grabbed my attention. I thought they were a band that had a lot of potential, but just never really reached it. And recently, with their bassist Aaron basically becoming the frontman after previous frontman Austin Carlisle left because of health reasons, I was definitely very intrigued as to how the new direction of the band would turn out. I actually saw them live on one of the last shows that Austin did. I think it may have been like the second to last show he did with the band, and he collapsed at the end. They had to cut the encore. They basically cut the end of the set because Austin had to go to hospital because he was almost dying. And I remember throughout that show, I was just thinking that Aaron could easily leave the band if something did inevitably happen to Austin, because I knew he had health problems, and I thought if there did become that point where he had to leave, I thought Aaron's vocals and everything were actually good enough, and his presence on stage was good enough that he could have held the band in the future. And that ended up happening not long afterwards. I saw him at Download Festival last year, and they were really good. I really enjoyed their set there, and he managed to hold his own as a vocalist, doing the screaming and the more melodic parts really well. So I was excited for this new album, especially after hearing the two singles Unbreakable and Back to You, which I absolutely loved. I thought they were two really great songs, and the album in the end was one, as I said, that surprised me, because it actually ended up being an album that I really enjoyed. Easily one of my favourites from this year, to be honest. It's a really great, unrelenting, exciting, fast, aggressive metalcore and new metal album. It blends the two together really well. And yeah, it has a blend of a lot of melody and aggression. It works just fantastically on this album. The songwriting is definitely the best the band have ever done. And there's a lot of really interesting moments on the album. Like, there's even a cover of Money by Pink Floyd, which I was like really confused about when it started, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work, because that song is an incredible song. It's honestly one of the best songs ever written, in my opinion. But their cover actually worked well, although nowhere near as good as Floyd's version. It was still an actually really good cover, and I was surprised by it. They actually kind of made the song their own, made it something interesting, and yeah, I really dug that cover. Defy in general, I don't think there's a single song on that album I dislike. I think they did a really great job with that album, and I can't wait to see what they have in store for us next. So I give Defy by OM&M a 9 out of 10.
What do I need to start again? And a millennium.
Next up, we have a follow-up album to one of my favourite debut albums of the entire decade, the new Marmozets album. Marmozets have been a band that have always been changing, from their very first EP and singles, which were kind of mathcore and really heavy stuff. And then their album, which kind of had a little bit of that mathcore element, but mostly went in a more post-hardcore sort of direction. That debut album was really great, had some fantastic songwriting. Lead vocalist Becca's voice was just astoundingly good on that album. There was really great guitar tones that were crunchy and bright. They used a lot of octave pedals as well to make them sound unlike any other guitar tone I can really think of. They really made it sound unique, and that was something I loved about that album. It was really unique. And with this new album, they've just kind of gone in another completely different direction. They've gone for a more alternative rock style, clearly inspired by some of the 90s alternative rock bands like Foo Fighters, Weezer, Pixies and stuff like that. They even got producer Gil Norton, who's known for producing loads of albums. I think he produced a couple Pixies albums, I may be wrong with that one, but I know he produced The Colour and the Shape by Foo Fighters. And when I first heard the song Play, the debut single from it, I was a little bit skeptical because it was a song that at first I wasn't really huge on. It's one that definitely did end up growing on me. But when they ended up releasing more singles like the song Habits, which has now become possibly my favourite Marmozets song, and Major System Error, I was really excited for this album and I wasn't disappointed. It's an album with just so much raw energy, although not as aggressive or anything as the last album. It's still really exciting. It's much more melodic and catchy, has some really great choruses, magnificent riffs, has that sort of like very Pixies-esque riff. It's hard to kind of describe it, but if you know Pixies and their sort of riffs, then yeah, that's sort of the style that they go for on this album. Not to mention the production work is really great. If there's one song I didn't really like, it's the slower song, which there was no reason why I didn't like it. It's just one I don't know, I just couldn't really get into it. And there was the song Insomnia, which I found a little bit annoying. Like, Becca's vocals on that song, just, I don't know, I didn't like them. But for the rest of the album, her vocals are incredible. She has some of the best vocals I think she's done for the band so far. Although there's not as much screaming and like harsh vocals as there were on the last album, she just hits these really high notes and just stretches her vocal range out incredibly. I just really dig this album. There's not much else I can say about it, so I give the new Marmozets album a 9 out of 10.
Mind your head, I lost my mind from thinking about you all the time. Mind your head.
Yeah, there was a reason why I didn't give this a full review. I quite liked the first Waterparks album. I was never huge into it, but I liked it for what it was, just a nice, fun little pop-punk album. But Entertainment is really uninteresting, to be honest. And yeah, after the amount of hate that some reviewers who disliked it or were indifferent to it got, I didn't really want to talk about it, but I guess I might as well just bite the bullet. Entertainment is just a really boring album. There's nothing really that interesting about it. Although there are some good songs on there, they kind of seem overshadowed by some of the just really generic, uninteresting songs. Every ounce of pop punk that they had on their first album is completely gone, and this album is basically just a pure pop album. Which can work, it has worked for some bands in the past, but the songwriting on the album just isn't really that good. Yeah, there's the best moments on the album is when they're kind of making fun of the genre and being self-aware, but sadly those moments are very few and far in between. I think that's the best thing about their first album as well, and the problem I have with their first album is those small moments where they're being self-aware and making fun of themselves are really good, but then they kind of move on and start doing exactly the thing that they were making fun of a minute ago and acting all serious about it. They kind of don't really seem to know what tone they want to go for, whether they want to be a serious pop-punk band or whether they want to make fun of all the tropes and stuff that pop-punk is known for. And yeah, Entertainment just, again, it just doesn't really work. There are some really good songs on there, like Blonde I really like, Tantrum is a fantastic song, and I also quite like Peach Lobotomy. But yeah, the rest of the album is just really forgettable. Just every song seemed to kind of blend into one. I don't really remember a lot of this album, to be honest. I just kind of blocked it out because I didn't find it that interesting. So I give Entertainment by Waterparks a 4.5 out of 10. Dead are a band that I've been into for a few years now, so I was really excited for their debut album to come out this year, and although it's not as good as I was expecting it to be, and I think over repeated listens my opinion has kind of deteriorated a little bit, I still think it's a pretty solid, like, emo post-hardcore sort of album. It's kind of hard to narrow down the style of this album because it seems to have loads of different styles throughout the album. But what I like about the album is that it's a very tongue-in-cheek album that a lot of the time makes fun of youth culture. It's full of these very aggressive songs like Up for Ransom is probably one of the heaviest songs on the album. The vocals on this album are really good as well. There's some fantastic guitar riffs. I don't really know what else there is to say about the album. I quite like it. It's nothing amazing, but I enjoy the album. It's one that I've gone back to a few times, and yeah, if you ever get the chance to see the guys live at all, I definitely recommend it because they're a really good live band as well. So yeah, I give the Golden Age of Not Even Trying by Dead 7.5 out of 10.
I push and you tend to shove. I give in and you don't give up.
So, the Wombats have a new album. Honestly, this album is one that's grown on me a little bit, but I don't think it's that good still. I remember when I first listened to it the day it came out, I absolutely hated it. I thought it was absolutely awful, and now in my opinion, I've listened up to it a bit. I think it's an alright album, nothing amazing, nowhere near as good as their previous 3 albums, all of which I really like. But yeah, it's not bad, I guess. There are songs I really like on there, like I like the song Turn. Cheetah Tongue's one of my favourites on the album. And I also like Lemon to a Knife Fight, which I originally hated, and that's one that's actually really grown on me. But yeah, a lot of the album is just really slow and uninteresting, and it's just really forgettable. Most of the album just feels like filler in my opinion. There's just not many really catchy, memorable songs on there like their other 3 albums. Everything just seems to be a little bit too, just, I don't know, basic, I guess. It's hard to really think of any of the songs that stick out, really. Yeah, a lot of the album just is forgettable. I don't know what really else to say. There are some really good songs in there, but there's a lot of just bland, uninteresting songs. Luckily, there's nothing that's really awful on the album. There's like no songs that I could say that's the worst song they've ever done. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of nothing, I guess, which is in some ways even worse than making a really bad song, because it just means I have nothing to talk about. So that's pretty much the only reason why I didn't do a full review of this album, because although I could talk a little bit about the songs I really like, apart from that, it's just kind of a forgettable album. But yeah, it has some good songs in there, so it's not too awful, I guess. So I give the new Wombats album 6 out of 10. So, the new Car Seat Headrest album. I'll admit that the original recording of Twin Fantasy I was never really into. I gave it a brief listen. I didn't listen to the whole thing because it's quite a hard album to listen to, that original version. But yeah, I gave it a little bit of a listen when this new version came out, and yeah, it's really hard to listen to. Everything's just really, really lo-fi and badly recorded. The album was basically just a bedroom project originally, but it became a classic album on Bandcamp. But the frontman of Car Seat Headrest has came out and said that he always wanted to kind of go back to the album and actually finish it with an unlimited budget and an actual band, and he actually wanted to make an album that was basically what he was originally envisioning when he made that original Bandcamp version. So the recent reworking and re-recording of Twin Fantasy is basically the definitive version of the album, and listening to this new version of the album, I can finally understand why everyone was raving about that original version so much. It's a very tongue-in-cheek album with just some incredible instrumentation, really on-the-nose lyrics. The songwriting is just some of the best that the band have ever done. Every single song is catchy and memorable. I like how there's elements of dance punk all over the place, and also a lot of that just lo-fi, just in-your-face indie rock sounds that they had on their previous album. Honestly, I have nothing but good things to say about this album. At the moment, it's easily my album of the year. That may change by the end of the year, but yeah, it's going to be a tough one to beat because this album is just absolutely incredible. I have nothing bad to say about it. So I give the new version of Twin Fantasy by Headrest a 10 out of 10.
No one ever took my eyes off you, girl. And I wish.
Oh god, and now we get into this one, the new Moose Blood album. I honestly really like Moose Blood's debut album. I thought it was a really great, catchy, and at times fun, and sometimes really upsetting and heartbreaking emo album. It's one of the big albums in this recent emo revival that's been going on over the last few years. But their second album, Blush, I was never really that into, although it's nothing awful. It has some really good songs on there, and I do actually kind of like it. It was just nothing I really loved or anything, and I remember my original review, I think I gave it like a 7, and although I may go down a little bit, I may say more of a 6 actually, but yeah, it has some really good songs on there, it's nothing awful. Whereas this new album is just so boring. Like, there is nothing on this album that sticks out. Every single song sounds the exact same. Nothing is that interesting. It all sounds like just filler songs from their like if you gave me this album and said, here's a collection of like B-sides that they were going to release for that last album but they never actually ended up coming out and then they decided to release it now, I'd honestly believe you. It's not good. It really isn't good. I think in the end I ended up liking 1 or 2 songs, but I can't even remember anything about how they went. Like, this album, I listened to it and by the second it was done, I completely forgot every single thing that happened in it. There's nothing interesting at all, the lyrics aren't memorable, the guitar work, the riffs and everything, nothing stand out. It's just a really forgettable, uninteresting album. Yeah, I was disappointed by it, but honestly I didn't have my standards that high, so I wasn't like bitterly crushed or anything. I was just like, oh, that's a shame. I was hoping it would actually be something decent, but it wasn't. It was just the definition of mediocre, I guess. So I give the new Moose Blood album, I don't know, a 3 out of 10, I guess. Like, I don't know. I can't remember this album. Do I even need to, like, talk about this album? Like, seriously, I think everyone knows this album is one of the worst things that's come out this year. There's nothing else I can say about it. It's just absolute trash. I guess 1 out of 10. Let's go with the same. I went for Mania because it's basically on the same level of quality as Mania. It's pretty much the exact same album, so yeah, 1. And there we go, there's a bunch of albums that I didn't give full reviews that I just wanted to talk about very briefly. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.